Maybe the last of
discussion open as we can before we go in.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think
So this is
end of the day too,
negotiating.
just physically here.
Okay. Just lay out.
Okay, let's get started. I'll call to order the Village Board of Oregon for Monday, July 7th, 2025. I would ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Higgins.
Here.
Kirchdorfer.
Here.
Knipfer. Here. McDaniel. Here. Peterson. Here. And Van Kampen.
Here. Thank you. Approval of June 6th, 2025 Village Board meeting minutes, if correct, and correction of mistakes, if any. Staff recommendation, motion to approve. Motion, Tom and Lynn. Questions, comments, corrections?
That'd be Tom and Paige.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hearing none? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 4, public appearances, comments, and communications. Items for discussion and/or possible action. A public comment. This part of the agenda allows members of the public to provide information to the village board, including items both on and off the agenda. Under the open meetings law, this agenda item allows the board to receive information and to ask questions of a presenter to facilitate a better understanding of the information. Board members may discuss procedural matters relating to the information, such as whether the information should be directed to staff, referred to a committee, or placed on a future board agenda. However, board members may not expand their discussion beyond such procedural matters. 15 minutes will be provided for this item with a 3-minute maximum per speaker. Otherwise, the agenda will proceed as posted. Anyone here for public comments? Anything on or off the agenda? Seeing none. Item 4B, 2025 Oak Street and Utility Improvements, Phase 1 Special Assessments. Item 1 is Public Works Director Report. Just go ahead.
So most of what I would speak to is in the packet. Each time we do one of these street projects, we do assess per village policy 50% of the sidewalk costs to adjacent homeowners. In this case, this is one of our projects wherein we try to select, we don't replace all sidewalk as we do with some projects for really, really old streets. We've tried to pick out the sidewalk that really requires replacement. And so that's why you see those kind of varying totals that don't quite line up with maybe what you're thinking the frontage is. But this represents kind of our best estimate at this point of the sidewalk that needs to be replaced. Once we actually put in new sidewalk, we'll measure that frontage in that area and provide a final assessment. So these come close, but occasionally things do happen during construction. An extra panel has to come out, so they're not exact to the quantities that you'll probably see at the end of the project.
Thank you. At this point, I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing. This part of the agenda allows members of the public to provide information to the village board related to the topic at hand. A time limit of 3 minutes per speaker is set unless otherwise modified by the village board. Anyone to speak on this item? Please come up. If you could give us your name and address for the record, and pull the microphone close.
My name is Mike Kugel, and I'm at 406 North Oak Street. I'm part of the Oak Street project, and I have a corner lot. So I have the Oak and the Lincoln project. I think the Lincoln project is something that's coming up in this next year, post the Oak Street project.
Right.
And there's just a couple of things that I just wanted to ask, because I didn't see another forum to do so. So
Okay.
One of the questions is on the draft resolution that I received, I didn't have any total, and I don't know if that meant that there were no estimates or that was going to be a zero assessment for me, or if there just wasn't an assessment, or it was so large we didn't want to print that yet.
It's one or the other. Go ahead.
Yeah, that would mean that there's no assessment associated with this project. For your property, as you know, there is gonna be the Lincoln Street project next year, and so there may be an assessable total for that. We don't assess corner lots for both sides of sidewalk, so even if you have some sidewalk that gets replaced with this project, we wouldn't assess that because your longer frontage is coming up next year.
And that was maybe in line with what I thought, but in addition to that, oh, sorry, is it on?
No, it's just not ringing.
Okay, good. It would be helpful to get that information as well, since this, to me, it's in total what I'm looking at, and I think the other piece of this that isn't as evident in this paperwork is that I was given a request for a police action, as it's called. I think that's a rather formal term for a taking or a eminent domain request. So it would be helpful to know what the nature of that is as well. I don't think I've been able to get any information back from that contact. So it was, I was got the notice of that. I got this meeting packet all at once, and so it was rather a lot to swallow. Sure. And that notice was, in addition to the right-of-way that I've already got, it's an additional 4 feet for the entire corner of the property. Mm-hmm. So I also just wanted to ask what the rationale might have been for that. It seems like the corners match pretty well, except for the Oak Street project. Looks like the street further south of me is wider than the street north of me, so I didn't know what.
I can speak to that.
Great, thanks. That's good.
So the paperwork that you got likely came from Fred Gruber. Mm-hmm. He's our real estate consultant, and that is for the East Lincoln Street project. So you are in a informationally challenging area for these 2 years, because you're right at that intersection. And the area, if you will, that paperwork is looking for is what's called a temporary limited easement. So that essentially means that with the East Lincoln Street project, we will have to go onto your property to do a little bit of grading. So essentially, in the cases that I think there are 5 or 6 affected properties, the sidewalk gets too close to that private property, and in some cases actually crosses over the property line. So to pull that sidewalk out, we're gonna have to go on the property, or our contractor will pick that sidewalk up, remove it, and then put it in the right-of-way. Typically, when we do a project like North Oak Street, we would do kind of a handshake agreement with the property owner. The East Lincoln Street project is partially federally funded, and so they require us to go out and get these temporary limited easements, these very formal documents that you give us, that give us that legal permission to just go on, take that sidewalk out, fill in with dirt, restore, and give you some money for the privilege to do that. So that's what's coming.
That sounds a lot better than
Yeah.
I'm about to get 4 feet of.
Right.
That's better. Thank you for that explanation.
And I should clarify too, it expires with the project, so we don't hold that in perpetuity. It is project specific, and then it goes away, and we don't have this easement hanging out on your property you need
Got
to
it.
worry
So
about.
this is a temporary easement.
Correct.
And as a result, so there may be more of that longer section. If you're gonna adjust the sidewalk, I'm assuming it's the entire sidewalk section that's gonna.
Correct. The other fun fact about the East Lincoln Street project, if you will, again.
Now for the hurtful part, right?
It's actually not. So because that East Lincoln Street project, the street portion is partially federally funded, we, the village, can only assess half of the portion that we are paying. So the grant program that we are going through for East Lincoln Street is an 80% federal, 20% local grant. So we, in theory, are only paying 20% of the sidewalk cost, so we can only assess 10% of the sidewalk cost versus the standard 50. So all the homeowners on that street, yes, unfortunately, will have that sidewalk assessment, but it'll be 20% of what a typical sidewalk assessment would look like.
I like that number better than 50% of
Yes.
a long segment.
Yeah.
So is this likely to change then for at least this year's Oak? So that's a 0 because of the corner lot situation?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know.
Great. Thank you for coming in, Mike.
Thank
Glad
you.
Lauren could answer your questions.
Anyone else? Please come forward, sir. Please state your name and address for the record and pull the microphone up close.
Roger Shuey, 299 Prairie View Street.
Okay.
I guess I hate to do this at a meeting, but I ran late getting my information to bring with me, but in the letter I got in the mail, it said our cost. And when I went to the first meeting we had, Lauren, you mentioned it was like $20 per square sidewalk. And I was getting 3 squares of sidewalks, but now it's like over $1,000. Are we being assessed for the curb also then? Or what's the increase in cost?
No, so the curb is not assessed per village policy, it's just sidewalk. It could be that the sidewalk unit costs went up. That's always kind of the danger in sharing that estimate, is that sometimes things come back higher, unfortunately.
500%?
Yeah, that would be extreme, I would say. It's also possible, and I'm guessing likely in this case, that the sidewalk replacement length increased when our engineer went out and actually took a look at it. So I can certainly look into what happened here and why you were given a different number initially versus what there is now. That's not a problem, and I can touch base with you.
All right. And as far as hooking up the sump pumps, do we get notified on that, or we gotta notify you, or when is that decided, or when's that hook up?
Yep, so that's in the plan. In your particular case, it's in the plan set. There's nothing you need to do. We'll let you know when they get to that point.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming in, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this item? Okay, I will close the public hearing at this point, and we'll move to number 3, resolution number 25-21, final resolution authorizing public improvements and levying special assessments against benefited property for 2025 North Oak Street and utility improvements project. Staff recommendation, motion to approve. So we have Tim and Amanda. Questions or comments? Lynn, please.
I just wanted to make a comment about a part of this program that is sometimes overlooked and fairly new, because I actually remember this being decided just before I got on the board, that there is a payment plan process for this should homeowners who are affected not want to pay the upfront cost. The village worked out a payment process on that with a fairly low interest rate. Fairly low being comparable to what interest rates are these days. But I think it's a nice way for the village to lend a hand in this. We understand that these costs can often be difficult to swallow, but it's important, when we look at how these road projects work in the properties that are adjacent to them. So I would just want to call that out for any property owners who are looking at this that we do have that payment plan. Lauren has it up on the screen right now, and I'm sure village staff would be happy to explain it further should anyone be interested.
Other comments, questions? Hearing none, we have a motion by Aikens, second by Peterson. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you all. Item 5, approve of vouchers in the amount of $1,432,213.31. Staff recommendation, a motion to approve. Paige and Amanda. Questions, comments?
Had one question.
Tom, please.
It's on page 30 of the packet, item 4825 on the K-9 squad card. They have two items there for a total of 48,000. It was 24,000 and 24,000.
I think they were coming from different funds.
And I guess my understanding that squad was going to be some $72,000, and then there was also an insurance reimbursement in that. The numbers just didn't roll all together for me, and am I missing like the insurance reimbursement and then some from donations or?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the setup because
No,
the setup's with GenCom.
yeah, this is just for the purchase of the squad,
Right.
and then there's additional costs that go along with the squad always.
Yes.
There's all the setup that goes along with it, which is part of that total 72,000 that you're thinking about.
Okay.
Yep, so with the setup also comes things like the radio, the squad radio.
So
have to
we
have-
basically bought a truck.
No,
And-
it would be
or-
a Explorer, a Ford
Well,
Explorer. Yeah.
Right. But it's got a lot of things to be added to it that'll be in a
Oh, yeah.
future.
Yeah, especially with the canine riding inside the car, it has to be made safe for the dog.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Tim? Sorry?
I had a question on page 31. There's an item, preferred title, land outlot 1, Villages of Foxborough, 26,000. What is that?
That's the purchase of the outlot by Bodie Howe and headquarters.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The,
All right, thank
the
you.
development
I remember
agreement,
that
yep.
discussion, yeah. Yep.
Lynn?
On page 32, item 9245, weights and measures. Someone just help me understand what that is.
Yeah, so that's just essentially a pass through for we charge people that are tested by the Department of Commerce, right?
That cap.
Yeah, and we get billed for that, and then we bill it out to who was actually tested for the year.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, this will be a roll call vote. We have a motion by Paige, second by Amanda.
Knipfer,
Yes.
McDaniel,
Yes.
Kirchdorfer,
Yes.
Van Campen.
Yes.
Higgins.
Yes.
And Peterson.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 6, consent agenda. Staff recommendation, motion to approve consent agenda items as presented. Items 6A through 6F. Motion by Tim. Second by Amanda. Questions, comments on these items?
Higgins and Amanda, that was?
That's correct.
Okay, sorry about that.
No questions? Okay, we have a motion by Tim, second by Amanda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, reports of committees. Items for discussion and/or possible action. A, Sustainability Committee. 1, proposal for a rain garden at Oregon Youth Center, 110 O Street. There was as Tim pointed out earlier, a substantial piece of information in the packet. Although, well, who would like to speak to this?
Lynn, do you want to start with the committees?
I sure can. One of the pieces of the sustainability plan that has been adopted by the village a number of years ago is to encourage unique land development, rain gardens being one of them. We have a lot of institutional knowledge in the community with the Oregon Nature Alliance and a couple of other key community members who spend a lot of time helping Dane County residents in rain gardens. And so the Sustainability Committee had a presentation during one of our meetings about this and decided that we would like to implement one as an example that our community could go to, walk by, observe, and potentially get some information about how to implement a rain garden themselves. Side note, there's a lot of great resources in Dane County if you're interested in implementing a rain garden on your property. They have kits where they'll send you the whole group of plants that you need and layouts. People will meet with you to design it, things like that. So in an attempt to find a space, we identified the youth center as a potential option, and unbeknownst to us, unlocked a bit of a Pandora's box in the paperwork around this. And that is something I'm going to let Martin explain.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. As mentioned, there's a memo that kind of outlines all of this, but essentially there's a lease agreement between the village and the youth center. The village owns a lot, the youth center uses it, and in order to put a rain garden on there, it would appear that we need to have an amendment to that agreement and making sure that both sides agree to it and have it in writing. But also, because this development was a planned development in our zoning, the landscaping of the lot also needs to be consistent with what was approved or amended to be new. So it has to go through our specific implementation plan process for plan development, which would be a plan commission approval. And then so looking through that and going back through the history of that, it looks like some of the conditions in the original plan development approval were not met. And so it appears that the original zoning for the property is currently sort of up in the air. And so we would need to just tidy that up and clean that up as part of this process. So that would be going through essentially the rezoning process to plan development, reinstating the GDP, and then having an SIP approved with the new landscaping plan. So in order to do all of this, we need to have that amendment to the lease agreement and then go back through the zoning process to make it legal.
Given that we have to go through these other procedures, is it appropriate for us to take action on approving this rain garden tonight?
The two things that I would suggest are, number one, directing village attorney staff to draft the amendment to the agreement that would incorporate the rain garden, assuming that's what the board wants to do. And then also the next step of that would be to direct staff to reinstate the GDP and then also process the SIP with the changes with the rain garden. And since it's the village's own land, we would be the applicant for these things in this case.
Sorry, Tim.
I just had a question. Given that it seems like most of the problem is related to the fact that the ground lease agreement wasn't signed until 2 weeks after the deadline, was there a purpose for the deadline, or was that just to kind of keep things moving? We set a date and it was sort of irrelevant, or was there a reason why it needed to be done by the end of August?
I would guess it's just to keep things moving. There wasn't anything that I saw that necessarily tied it to that. There was also a condition that a CSM be submitted by that date as well, which did happen. So I think it was just to put a deadline to keep things moving.
All right. Our very efficient clerk, Candy, has a motion drafted here. I'll take the liberty of making that. So I'll move to direct the village attorney to draft an amendment to the ground lease agreement to incorporate the inclusion of the rain garden improvements. Let's just go with that as initial motion. Second by Amanda. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I will move to direct the village staff to proceed with reinstating the property's GDP. This will require plan commission review, public hearing, and recommendation to the village board. The village board will need to formally approve it. The SIP incorporating the new landscaping plan inclusive of the rain garden can proceed in tandem with the GDP, but only needs approval from the plan commission. That's the motion. Second by Amanda. Motion by Phil, second by Amanda. Questions, comments? Go ahead, Amanda.
Okay, so this is sort of related, but and this is more a question for Lynn. Do we, I love this idea of the rain garden at the youth center. Are we involving the youth in helping plant it and do all these things? Because that seems like a good learning opportunity.
Yes, in terms of the planting, that has not yet been planned because we have applied for the plants through Plant Dane. So once we are able to move forward through all of this process, we will figure out that planting. As far as the maintenance, the youth center will take on that maintenance. And so we would hope to have some of our local rain garden experts come in and help them understand how to maintain it and potentially do that every now and again to sort of help re-educate the youth on rain gardens.
Okay. And can I ask a different question?
Please.
I'm assuming that our, like, we are the landowner, so it's our expense. There's nothing we charge back to the youth center or anything like that, right?
I think it's pending. We might get these plants for free through this program for Dane County.
Correct. And should we not get it through this program, I think the ultimate goal of the Sustainability Committee is to get them at a very low cost in some way, shape, or form. We're starting with this program to see how we do. But again, there's lots of connections in the area that we may be able to pull on in order to get some of those resources for little to no cost.
Cool. Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting that we actually do that. My point was the costs are minimal and probably the village can absorb them, just for the record. But yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion by the chair, second by Amanda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Carries. Item 8, unfinished business, item for discussion and/or possible action. A, New Oregon Area Senior Center Building Project. 1, presentation of project schematic design, including site plan, preliminary floors, plans, elevations, project schedule, and budget. I think I'm going to hold off on the motion. Jeff, you want to come up, your group?
Good evening. I'm Jeff Vine, so I'm the owner's representative for our new Oregon Area Senior Center project. Brett's going to go through some design, but I thought I'd give you a quick update on the things that we've been up to because there's other items on the agenda later that it'll help you make sense what we're doing and in what order. So maybe a good visual would be maybe we could just look at the site plan while I'm giving this update. So we've got on the list that we're going to go through the schematic design. So Brett from OPN is going to talk to you about that in a minute. We should have plans completed, the complete design by the end of the summer. And then our original schedule, we were hoping that by the end of the year, we would have everything ready that we could potentially go bid the project. So we are kind of halfway through the process of completing design and working towards that goal at the end of the year. The other thing that we're working on is, if you remember the site plan that we shared with you before, there's a parking lot and a bioretention swale shown where the existing Waterman Street Road is. So we're working on vacating that street right of way and hopefully incorporating that property into the property for the senior center. But there's a process to that we're working on, and you'll also hear some more about that process tonight. We need to get that done so we can keep moving forward with project approvals, which next things on the list for project approval would be we're going to go back to the Plan Commission on September 4th, because we need to get a GDP plan approved for our overall site. We need to get a CSM approved because we're incorporating multiple parcels that the village own, including the Waterman parcel potentially, into one reorganized piece of property. And then we would have, also that on that date, we would want to get our SIP approved, which would be our specific implementation plan for the project and the design and everything that goes along with that. So that would be a big moment for us if we can have everything ready for that date. And then after that, we would come back to the village board and have them approve those same three things. And then eventually we would come back to you guys in October and have the actual bid set of documents that we would want to have that approved before we would go out to bid and get the decision from the board that, yes, we do want to go out and bid the project. So those are some things that are coming up on the horizon. Another thing that's going to start happening fairly soon is the old USPS building and the old library. Poor Jennifer, the old library is going to get demoed. So we're planning on starting that on Monday the 14th, which is next Monday. We've got a pre-con meeting set up with the demo contractor this Thursday to go through some details. We've had hazardous materials been removed, utilities have all been disconnected. Everything is ready to go to be able to start demo. The fire department's actually out there using those buildings for training, and they said that as they get closer to Monday, they're really going to kind of have at it where they're going to start cutting holes in roofs and cutting through walls and doing lots of things that they don't get to do all the time because they don't have buildings that they can ruin and start on fire. So that'll be happening
Intentionally.
soon. Yeah, intentionally starting on fire, that's right. So with that, I'll let Brett go through the design elements, and then we'll both be able to answer questions at the end.
Yeah, so I think just to talk through the site plan here a little bit, we worked through a bunch of different iterations on how to lay this site out, but really the use of the building really dictated a lot of this. So we have parking stalls that are slightly larger than what you might expect to see. That's because of the nature of it, allowing people ample space to get out of their vehicles, but then also providing safe travel paths for them to get to the building. So we're not expecting people to walk down the drive aisles. We're expecting them to go between the drive aisles and then make their way to the building, and then providing ways for them to travel north-south, not only at the building, but that hatched area that starts most planned south and then works its way up more towards the entryway. The main entryway is right in the fold of the building there, and that really kind of serves as a dividing point between the southern half of the building and then what's on the north portion of the building, that northwest portion of the building, which is where the gym would be. You'll notice that there's two bioretention swales on both the east and the west. Part of that is because of the way that the building is, where the gym is located. It naturally wants to kick water back to the east, but the site wants to push everything back towards the west. So we naturally have these two zones where we're trying to collect water and make sure that it's seeping into the ground appropriately. There's also the parking lot that is on the easternmost portion. That is mostly what we expect where the staff would park. So we're trying to provide a clear delineation in the way that people should traverse the site as well. So if we go to the next slide here, this will give you the preliminary floor plan as we're working through. A lot of the iterations of the floor plan have largely been worked out to this point. There's still a few areas that we're focusing on, namely in that entryway where you see that curved arc in there. There's just some different iterations that we're working through on that. So as I mentioned, a lot of the administration areas is really planned south along with ADP. The kitchen would then, which is on the far east side of the plan, would then also go and feed to the southern portion of the plan, which is where the pickup and drop off would be. That area furthest to the south is also where we have a covered drive, which you've probably seen in the packet there. And there's a number of reasons that we looked at that being covered. One, we want to provide people safety in inclement weather for dropping people off for the adult day program, but also if they're picking up medical equipment that they're borrowing, as well as people being able to pick up meals for Meals on Wheels to be delivered. So really, that is kind of a vital part that is covered, as opposed to, and I know, Rachel, we pushed on you quite a bit, and you pushed right back, so thank you. Why can't they just go out the back door? It really came down to that safety and making sure that, that people, as they are graciously giving of their time to help other people, that we are thinking about them in the same manner. That covered access, then you'll see those dots that work up the plan on the west side. Those bring you back towards the entryway. So there is a covered walk along there. So again, in inclement weather, people can cross, get closer to the building, and then make their way back to the entryway. Having the admin area directly adjacent to that provides that the staff is able to keep an eye on the parking lot. So if somebody were to trip and fall, the chances are that somebody is going to be able to see them and provide assistance to them. So then as we come back into the entryway there, through the main lobby there's the reception desk, there's the cafe, which is connected to the kitchen there. And then just planned north of that is where the game lounge is. So this is where people would come play cards, pool, things like that. Then to the north, further of that, is where we have the classroom, the fitness studio, and the main hall, as well as a lot of these corridors are wider than what you would typically expect to see. But again, the use type is set up for people in wheelchairs, using walkers, and in that one hallway right where your cursor was, just north of where it says hall, that is our balance corridor. So there's things there. Most of them are furniture that will be purchased and placed in that corridor for people to work on their balance. And then the fitness studio again to the plan north there. The main hall with a dividable wall so it can be broken up and used for multiple different functions. And then the gymnasium plan east there primarily will be used for the senior center, but then in off hours will be open to the public. So that's kind of where we landed with the floor plan as it sits right now. You'll also notice on the back patio there, just out from the game room, there is a shuffleboard table that we're showing there for scale.
I'm gonna see if we have questions at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Lynn?
I don't know if this, I'm sure this has been discussed. In the after hours lobby, it looks to me like you could go into the after hours lobby and still get into the senior center portion. See, you're nodding like yes, yes. Can you explain to me, is that closed off? Or is there an intentional decision why it's not?
It will be close-offable.
Okay.
So think of the library, how we have that double vestibule where you come into a single vestibule, but then you can go right, and then we have that gate for after hours. Mm-hmm. It'll be a similar setup in this, where you come into that main vestibule and you turn north. Let's say it's after hours, where it says the after hours lobby. Just where that family restroom is, there's a thicker portion on the floor plan. Mm-hmm. Right in there will be a gate. That's kind of what we're thinking, that after hours, we're still working through some of the logistics, but right now we're planning that will be a gate that would fold out so that people can't get into the rest of the senior center after hours.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Tim?
Not a question, just a comment. The covered drive-up area for people who are delivering meals. Thumbs up on that. Don't let that get taken out later.
Me
I'll
too.
do my best.
Me too.
Thank you, Rachel.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, please proceed. Go ahead and proceed.
Okay. So if we go to the next slide here, this is where we're starting to get into some of the renderings of what we're proposing at this point. One, We started with a lighter, more cream-colored palette for a brick masonry on the exterior of the building. We've looked at that, whether it's a brick or a stone or something along those lines. But really, we wanted to make sure that it was a durable material, so we weren't thinking about a more residential siding coming down to the ground. Because this is downtown, there's a lot of paved surface around it. There's gonna be things like salt, snow removal, all of those sort of things that we really wanna make sure that where the building meets the ground, it's thought through and durable. So the main entrance here, you see that canopy that we were talking about where it extends from the south, draws your eye to this main entryway. We are proposing a lot of glass in that main entry vestibule, and that's really to try to bring in as much natural light as possible. Another thing that we have to manage with this is glare. So not only as we age, it is hard to see through glare. So that is one thing that we are constantly paying attention to as we're updating these designs. But really, we wanted to make it open and inviting for people to come into. And when you turn into there, that's where that vestibule is. So the upper portion, where it's that kind of white wedge or that lighter color wedge where it says Oregon Area Senior Center, that is the gym box. And so that is an elevated portion. The rest of the building doesn't need to be that tall. But we really tried to set this datum line for the rest of the building at the same level with that brick. And then that wedge element pops up to provide the necessary height for the gym. And then where your cursor is right now, that is a translucent panel where we're again trying to bring in as much natural light into the gym mass as possible. Not direct vision glass, because a lot of times people don't want to be seen while they're exercising, but they want that connection to nature through natural light. So we're trying to provide some of that as well. Okay, so we can go to the next here. Similar perspective here, stepped back just a little bit further, but just showing you how the building can glow at night. At one time where it says Oregon Area Senior Center, we did have that as a true translucent panel as well. But then we started backing that off as we were starting to investigate some of the glare and things like that. So really trying to make sure that you can see that entranceway. We're providing lighting underneath that canopy, again, to make sure that everything is very well lit for people as they come to the senior center. Okay. So this would be around the corner, standing on Brook Street looking back at the building. That translucent panel that we were talking about wraps up and over and kind of holds the corner on Brook Street. Again, trying to give a nice presence during the daytime, allow in a lot of natural light while shading some of the direct views. And then across the street is where the ball diamonds are and all of that. So again, it's I don't want to say more utilitarian on this side, but it's a little bit more mass, doesn't have as many windows. We're still providing a bunch of windows on that side to carry the rhythm around the building, and then that wedge on top as well. Okay, go to the next. So this is the quote-unquote backside. This building doesn't really have a backside to it. If there was a backside, this is kind of it. So on the opposite side of this is where the lobby main entrance is. So this is where the cafe and that game lounge are. That's what's sitting in the two glass areas. We really wanted to provide the opportunity for people to be drawn further into the space. And so creating that glass link between the two, once you're in the building, helps draw you through the building. The angles that you're seeing there are reminiscent of what is happening with the gym box where it kicks up, but it's also helping draw people further into the space by creating this vaulted volume when you get into the space. And the little fenced area that's there, that is where that outdoor patio would be. And this is looking across where the bio retention basin is there. And then the last rendering here is that covered canopy for pickup drop off there. So we've got planters there really to let people know where they should and shouldn't cross in and out of that cavity. Again, providing a lot of natural light, but the 4 squares that you see there are, we're looking at those being a translucent roof panel, so that we can get as much natural light into that ADP program as possible. There's some higher bay windows there that look into the ADP area. Part of that is there's cars, there's a lot of activity that happens in this zone, and that can be pretty disorienting for people in the ADP. So we want to try to limit that as much as possible while providing that natural connection to natural light and everything. So we're investigating a translucent panel at the ceiling there in that canopy.
Please, go ahead, Amanda.
Question. That barrier that you have there, is that intentionally that thick, or I just, it seems very solid, and like, I don't know what the gap is that designed for people to be able to use a shorter loop as opposed to going through the longer? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the thought there was really, if somebody is there picking up medical equipment and another person comes in to either drop off ADP or pick up food or anything, they would have a secondary exit to get out of there and not be trapped in there. We did look at it being double wide, but then it just takes up a lot of real estate there as well. As for the planters being that wide, we can always look at those being thinner, but really it was trying to provide at least an adequate space where we can get something substantial from a vegetation standpoint to grow in there and establish.
Oh, for vegetation, not for safety or for anything?
It's kind of all of it. Yeah, the barrier is, the height of it is more about creating that barrier so cars aren't running into it and all of that, right? The width of it is mostly about trying to, what we think it could be for vegetation to establish in there.
Yeah, if you look at it from a plan view, those are maybe like 4 feet wide, but if you look at the radius of those curbs at the end of those islands, you need to have a reasonable turning radius, so. It's maybe easier to understand when you look at it from top down on the civil plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions? No? Good.
Yes, that was it. Do you want me to just talk?
You got 15 more minutes you gotta use up,
Right. Shadow puppets it is.
Well, do you want to introduce the movie, or?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, forgot about the movie. So Eric had pulled together a video, kind of a fly through to show us what it would look like and feel like to fly around the building here. So
Does it have audio?
I can sing over it if you would like me to, but I would rather not. No, it's
No singing
audio's
aloud.
It's a
Thank you,
silent, it's
Phil.
a silent film.
Yeah.
We don't have that technology yet.
Make it full screen.
So one thing that we did not talk about is that skylight that pops up there. That is an enclosed, perfect time for it to lock up, there is an interior courtyard in the adult day program, and that is to give them access to the outdoors without them being outdoors. And so that is what that wedge is providing. It's a clear story to get natural light into there.
Work in progress, I guess.
Can I ask a question then?
Yeah,
while it's
for sure.
spinning?
Please.
Were there going to be solar panels?
What's that?
Are there going to be solar panels on this?
So we're investigating, obviously everything is budget driven on it, but we would plan that everything is at least solar ready. So that means a little bit more beefy roof structure. It's not that much more, but we want to at least plan for it. So in the event that it does come down in the future, we can.
Yeah, if you look at, most of the roof is relatively flat, so the entire gym roof is a huge surface area that would probably house more solar panels than we could afford, but we could also have solar panels on the other flat roof area. And we are definitely planning on budgeting for some amount of solar.
Great.
Do we want to run it some other way and plug in?
We might be
Or
able
you
to.
just have a flash drive?
We got it.
Oh, got it.
It's technology.
So really, these bioswales that we were talking about, we're trying to blend them into the nature and really help nestle the building into the nature by having plenty of trees, green islands around that, so that it's a comfortable site for people to walk.
Yeah, player, yeah, right.
That's what I call them,
Yeah.
NPCs.
Grass needs cutting.
Should have had a guy mowing.
Yeah.
But as we get closer here, you'll start to be able to get glimpses to where you look through the cafe into the main lobby there. And so this back patio, we talked about whether we actually put a fence or not around it, and it really came down to safety. So we're controlling access, one, to help with staff's ability to understand who is in the building at all times.
Sure.
And if that back door is truly open, then now you've got two secure points that you have to manage. So which ultimately led to us showing some sort of gate on that back side.
Okay,
Questions, comments, reactions?
Tom, looks like Lynn, everybody?
Yeah.
Start with Tom.
I was involved in a lot of the visioning sessions, and I actually saw the video before, and I was very excited about it. One of the things that you mentioned, the larger parking spaces and the access and so forth, but there's also lack of curbs and the flat surfaces that there'll be no place, no step up, no tripping hazard there. There's been a lot of extra thought and extra attention to the population of people that we see primarily using this during the day. So kudos to the design. I think you did a really nice job of going back and listening to the visioning sessions and the ideas that came out of it and all the public comments that we've had previously. So I think it was a great progress.
Okay, who else? Lynn?
So I'm going to start by saying beautiful work. Thank you so much for all of this. My comments coming soon have nothing to do with what you have produced here. It's fantastic. One of my qualms on this, and I think I brought this up the last time we talked about this as well, is that I think I look at new building projects on a twofold mindset now, which is the building and the staffing. And I don't want to walk down a path too far if the operating pieces of this aren't in scope as well. And that has nothing to do with you guys. So I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but what I noticed in the plans is that day program entrance and the main entrance. There's a day program office and then the main office. In terms of staffing, the current staffing levels that we have at the senior center, is that adequate to, number one, withstand this current building setup, and number two, the flood of new senior center users that will be knocking down your doors when this beautiful building is built?
So I don't have any concerns about the adult day program
Okay.
staffing, because that's the same number of staff. They're still licensed for the same number of participants.
Okay.
It will actually probably be easier for them, because now they're coming in our front door and coming through our building and to get to the adult day program room. Here, they will actually be able to see people coming in the door, let them in directly into just their space.
Okay.
So that I don't see as any different. With the larger building, we've tried to design the reception area so that when people come in, they have to pass the receptionist, check in, and will go to a space or not a space, or a space, or, you know, one of the free open things like the game room. The receptionist can see a fair amount because of the glass. Part of those rooms may not be open if they're not in use. So if the main hall isn't being used, the doors may be locked and people can't go in those spaces. We do have going for us, thankfully, 180 volunteers who will probably expand in number when we expand in size. And we've been able to manage volunteers pretty effectively. And I foresee that, you know, we may be adding some volunteers to cover certain spaces. So if our gift shop coffee area is open certain hours, I can imagine a volunteer might be there, just as volunteers handle our gift shop now.
Sure.
So we're really trying to design this so that it doesn't require more people, and so that we can use some technology like cameras.
Oh, great.
To be able to, for the receptionist to be able to see what's going on in spaces that maybe that person can't see in person.
Okay.
But hopefully that'll help make it possible to run something of that much bigger size without bigger staff.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I have kind of 1 second follow-up question, and I think this might be for you, Elise. In terms of the after hours and the gym portion, obviously that's an additional resource, it's additional time. Where do we sit currently in, obviously, I guess what I'm saying is we don't necessarily have to have it open after hours if we can't staff it or we can't do that. I think that goal would be that we would. So what does that look like in terms of operating?
So a lot of details still to be determined. You can see, and I don't think Brett pointed out, but there is kind of a office space desk area that would be in that lobby or inside the gym, so that there would be somebody who could be stationed there and keep an eye on the, you know, after hours usage. There's a lot of different ways we could set up the space as far as, is there a membership that's required? Is there payment that's required to use the space? And how is that set up? So that could be one potential like revenue option to help
Sure.
offset an after hours staff time.
Okay.
There's also other partners in the community that have kind of a shared interest in community recreation. And so they've talked about, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to share some staff there. So we have that to potentially explore. But yeah, a couple of those elements, whether, you know, how people are charged, how reservations are made, and is that something that's handled by like Leanne, or is that a separate staff person? What are the hours going to be? All that's still to be determined, but I think we have enough space at least to have some flexibility for staff to be located on site, some storage for equipment and things like that, that even if we have a setup initially and something doesn't work 10 years down the road, we have some flexibility to kind of pivot and maybe have a different, maybe a different operating system or different hours or something that can still function the way that we hope it will.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from both of you is that this design, what we're seeing, should not, hopefully won't, increase the operating costs personnel-wise to maintain this building personnel-wise. Okay.
No? Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to somewhat echo what Tom had said. I really think the design incorporated a lot of elements that are critical to the people that will be using this building. And I really appreciate the time and thought that went into understanding who'd be using this space as you designed it, and not just making a pretty building. So thank you. It's well done.
Yeah, again, great. And I will freely admit that I have not been to a lot of the planning meetings. I'm not on the planning committee for this building, but it looks really good. You know, I always look at buildings with an eye towards practicality. I'm trying to picture the everyday use of people, and just a couple of things that popped out to me. One is the kitchen area where the walk-in cooler, the walk-in freezer, and the dry goods and all that stuff are down a hallway. And I guess I'm just looking at that thinking, that's a lot of steps to get what you need. It feels like there might be a lot of walking back and forth there. I don't know, maybe the people who do professional kitchens don't care about that, in which case you can ignore me, but I'm thinking if I'm using this building, if I were gonna use it to cook, that would be important. Also, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to picture like where meals would happen. Would those just all happen in the cafe, or would there ever be something like catered in the main hall? In which case, the main kitchen is quite a distance from the main hall, but there's the teaching kitchen there. Would that be used I mean, I'm trying to like functionally trying to see how the building would work. Is there, do you want to speak to any of that, or?
I will say that I think it'll be really helpful to all of us in the design world when the kitchen designer gets on board and can start assessing this and going, okay, you've created these boxes, but this is how these boxes really need to be, because that's their expertise. As for we've even sort of made some tweaks to this plan since it got into this packet. The cafe, what we would call our dining room, is here an L-shaped configuration. I didn't like the inability to see that whole space from the kitchen, and so I felt there was blind spot there. People, the volunteers and the kitchen staff don't want to not be able to see everybody in the dining room, what's going on. So the OPN people creatively switched up some of the design there to make that bigger, or it's not bigger, a differently shaped, they moved some bathrooms around for us a bit and came up with a space with no blind spot. As far as food coming in, that is not, I don't see us doing a lot of catered things. One thing we haven't talked about tonight is the way the gate is set up for after-hours use and the way the main hall is set up there by the gym. That main hall could be usable by the public potentially after hours because they can go into it through the gym. Somebody there may want to bring food in for an after-hours kind of event. But typically we don't cater. That's why we have a kitchen.
Well, yeah, I meant like if you made something in the kitchen, that's a long way to get the food to that location. Like if you had overflow or.
Let me just add some comments, okay? Because
Sure,
we're really talking about 3 totally different uses in the building. So the commercial kitchen, which is for the meal preparation for the meal service, and then for meals that would be happening in the cafe, is for that function. Yes, there are some storage areas down the hall, but there is also appliances and casework and cabinets and things inside the kitchen. It's a large kitchen. So the things that are a little bit further down the hall are, longer term storage, frozen stuff, things that you're not using that day. So that kind of maybe answers that question. The teaching kitchen is for teaching, in that room in a classroom setting. So that kitchen wouldn't be serving, the main hall. And we wouldn't be serving the main hall from the kitchen that serves the meal service or the cafe either. But people could cater into the main hall if we let them. There is also countertop space and cabinets inside the main hall. It's hard to see on this plan because of the scale, but there would be plenty of room in there if somebody wanted to set up a couple sternos and have some hot appetizers or whatever they might want to have in that room. So they're three separate functions if that helps you understand why they're not next to each other.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you.
I would say that, and this is completely up to how the building evolves, if there was ever an after-hours function, that with the location of that teaching kitchen could have a secondary use to support a catered-in event where they're putting their things out and then bringing it into the main hall. In that instance, though, it would be open to the rest of the main hall. So you would want to have that as a consideration to it.
Yeah, we have challenges with where we're gonna kind of draw the line of what after-hours uses can use, because, it starts snowballing, and pretty soon, we can't control having people all throughout the building. So at some point, there'll be a defined line that says, this is the security line for after-hours use.
Gotcha. And one more.
Please, go ahead.
Okay.
I know now the gift shop area is kind of behind the reception desk. And I see now it's kind of across, and I'm wondering, is that gonna require someone to staff it separately, or is it designed so that the person at reception can look into the gift shop and the person can purchase the things outside
That is
it?
currently the
Okay.
intent, is that the reason it's located there is so that people at reception, whoever is sitting there, can keep an eye on that, as
Okay.
well as the rest of the facility from that location.
Okay, cool, good.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Sorry, I have two more questions. First question, when this is built and we have the ice cream social, which we're having this week, is the ice cream social in the main hall or is the ice cream social in the cafe?
Well, it could potentially be in both places.
What?
Because we could be serving the food in the cafe.
Okay.
And the entertainment could be going on in the main hall,
Oh.
because that's what we do now. We serve our food in our dining room, and we
Sure.
have entertainment in our
In
main
the main
hall.
hall.
So
Yeah.
people have a couple of places to sit and socialize or go listen to the music. And
Love that. Okay,
I
that
think-
helps me
I think when you're
see-
looking at the plan, it looks like the main hall's full of like dining room tables. The main hall has carpeting.
Okay,
It's kind of like a convention center room.
got it.
So it's not set up for the ice cream, but it's set up for presentations, seminars, other
Sure.
use, music, those types of things where you want that type of a room.
Sure. Okay, that helps me visualize those
Yes.
three, the multi-use. And then I'm just gonna make one quick comment. You had made a good mention about where do we draw the line on what's available after hours. Just as a side note, this is a very personal thing. If I'm bringing my kids to the gym for something, I want somewhere to be able to like set up my laptop and do important village work, because that's what I do when I'm not doing my job. And so having some access to some seating for like parents and families who might be waiting for their kid to do whatever it is their kid's doing, might be helpful instead of having to sit like along the edges of the gym and risk your life. And your laptop, exactly. So just a thought when you're discussing sort of what that,
Yeah, I like that
Boundary
idea. Like
looks
that
like.
after-hours lobby, there's seating, on the main lobby side, but there
Right.
could also be seating.
true, something.
For that use, for people that are, waiting for the kid to get done bouncing the ball off the wall or.
Could also be specific furniture that's selected for the main hall too, if that's opened up.
Right.
I think there's a number of solutions that are there, but yeah.
Okay. I'm done now.
Okay. A couple things. One, I'm going to go back to the after-hours use, and I think Lynn made a point about, there will be an attendant more than likely at night, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
Again, still to be determined, but I think we would probably want to have somebody with eyes on the court to make sure we
Right.
know who's in the building, that everybody's
Right.
safe, getting equipment out, that kind of thing.
Thank you. So is there a space on this plan that I can look at and where this person is going to sit or be, or should there be a designated spot?
The-
Otherwise, I can see a card table in the lobby every night.
Yeah, it's either right inside or right outside that double doors that goes from the after-hours lobby into the gym. There's gonna be a little station there.
Okay. So that's a permanent fixture?
Yes, there'll
Yeah.
be something,
Okay.
right, there'll be a little area there.
Okay. The other thing is, I would be remiss in not echoing some comments from the planning commission, which I shared, and that is some of the planning commission members were not fans of the cream-colored brick, and I would agree. One planning commission member compared it to a 70s high school. Please take no offense. As someone that attended a 70s high school, I can tell you that's true.
It's kind of spot on, right?
Yeah, right. So I'm passing that along. I think it's important to mention that. That's all I have.
And to that point, we've heard that. We've taken another look at some things. There's other materials that we are currently investigating as
Great.
well. So,
Okay,
yep.
thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. We're looking for a motion on this item, which I will reread. Presentation of project schematic design, including site plan, preliminary floor plans, elevations, project schedule, and budget. Tim and Amanda, further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We need this gentleman to stay. Do you want to go over the next item? Stay?
Yeah.
Great. Item 2, review bids for site demolition at 252 and 256 Brook Street. That is the former post office and library buildings. An award and approved contract for work with Interstate Demolition LLC in the amount of $109,970. Looking for a motion. Tom and Tim. And Jeff, did you want to comment on that, or, I mean, it's pretty well explained in the packet.
Right, just a couple of comments, is that, we had budgeted $200,000, that was my guess, and we had bids range from 109 to 310. Interstate is a local company that does excavation and demolition work that I'm familiar with, so I guess I'm happy that we have somebody that's a known quantity, and they gave us a great number. I've met with them since and feel very confident they have everything they need included in their bid to do the job, so I think we're in good shape.
Great. Tim?
Do we have any idea why there was such a wide spread in the bids? I mean, that's, 3 times the price for the high to the low.
I can't explain what different companies' thinking is when they submit municipal bids, but I know there's plenty of times where they're hoping that maybe they're the only bidder. So we did a good job of trying to communicate word of mouth, making sure people knew that the project was out there, so we got, a decent number of bidders. So I don't know, it's strategy, and sometimes people need work to keep people busy.
Tom?
I'd actually asked you this one question once before. What will be after the demolition, what will the surface level be? Are you going to backfill all of that with compactor, or are you going to compact it, or what's going to be the?
Yep, if you actually, so this is part of the pre-con that we're gonna have, and the pre-meeting that I had with Interstate, is that if you look in the bid documents, what we talked about doing is, let's say when we get rid of we have to excavate for the foundation for the library, so there's gonna be somewhat of a hole in the ground. The bid documents call for them to fill that up, and then we would put soil and seed there, which I don't think is a good idea. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna trade. What also has in the bid documents is has them providing some fencing until we get closer to the ultimate construction project. So we're gonna look at trading some fencing and getting rid of the dirt and seed, and we're just gonna bring all of those areas at both the USPS and the library building up to grade with compacted crushed gravel, so that we basically have a gravel parking lot. So, if the library doesn't start right away, or in the meantime, you know, basically we have a parking lot that functions. We don't, and the ultimate contractor is not gonna want muddy black dirt
Yeah. Move
and
the soil
grass
out of
that
the
they
way.
need to remove anyway. It's
Right.
basically set up for them to have laydown area for the big construction project, you know, right away. So that's what I'm imagining it would be left at. We've left all the stormwater in place for the asphalt and concrete that's out there, and then we will put gravel where we don't have that. So it'll end up being, you know, one kind of manageable surface, easy to take care of.
Lynn, please.
I was asked this by a resident a couple of weeks ago. Could you explain what happens to these materials?
I have an email that I'm going to help myself, because I was forwarded that question. So, so here's what's happening, and this is from talking with the demolition sub. So all of the waste materials get hauled to the Dane County landfill, where they go through what's called the GFL recycling facility before they would actually put anything in the landfill. Masonry materials are hauled to locations that will recycle the material to be used as aggregates. If there's any site pavement or asphalt, same thing, it gets salvaged, crushed, and used as aggregate. All the metals that are generation, they basically pick things out, you know, sheet metal, copper, iron, and they'll separate that as they're demoing the buildings. And then they take those materials, some things they might get some compensation for, other things are taken and they're recycled separately, like
Okay.
the sheet metal. So the demolition subcontractor will separate and recycle the large steel or copper materials in exchange for payment. They reflect the value of this material and the amount of their overall bid. So they've already kind of taken a guess at what they might be able to get a value of what
Sure.
they're taking apart.
Okay.
But, and then, you know, they try to winnow down what actually ends up going into the landfill.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion by Tom, second by Tim. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, proposal from Staley Plumbing and Heating Incorporated to remove air conditioning unit refrigerant from the former post office and library buildings prior to demolition in the amount of $3,150. And proposal from Great Lakes Culinary Designs for commercial kitchen and dining facility design services for the new senior center in the amount of $7,500. Staff recommendation, motion to approve. Paige and Amanda. Anyone to speak to this one? It seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the Freon proposal is just to capture the Freon that's left in the HVAC system for both buildings so that we can recycle that. And then the kitchen design is a sub-consultant that'll work with OPN to help us fine tune the details for the kitchen areas that we were talking about earlier.
Okay. Questions, comments? Okay, motion by Paige, second by Amanda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, item 8B, change order number 1 for 2024 street resurfacing and maintenance. Contract B with Payne and Dolan for $14,450 deduct for grass restoration repair and related landscape proposal from Lakeside Landscaping for restoration of Keller Alpine multi-use path in the amount of $14,450. Motion, recommendation, motion to approve as presented. Amanda and Tim. This looks pretty straightforward. Payne and Dolan opted. I'll let Lynn say it rather than.
It is and it isn't straightforward. So this is hoping to close the book on kind of an outstanding item from last year's paving job. So if you remember, we did bid 2 paving contracts last year. One was really focused on streets, and that was South Perry Parkway and South Burr Oak Avenue. The other was very focused on paths and recreation. So it included replacement of the entire Lerner Keller Alpine path loop, as well as 3 basketball courts, and then paving those sections of the Rotary Trail that were gravelled. Well, the paving was completed last year and the restoration around the basketball courts was also completed. The restoration along the Lerner Keller Alpine Trail was not completed. And while that is to some extent filled in just as a matter of nature taking back what is its right to do, there are still areas where there's significant drop off. And our engineer, as well as some of our staff, have been in touch with Payne and Dolan multiple times over about 6 to 8 months, trying to get them to come back and do this restoration, which is their contractual obligation. And that has not occurred. We've been told multiple times that it will happen, and then those deadlines have passed, and it's been very difficult to get an answer as to what's going on and when it will happen. So at the suggestion of our engineer, Town and Country, we reached out to a local landscape firm, Lakeside Lawn Care and Landscaping, and asked them, hey, what would you charge us to do the restoration along this path around the park? And they came back with this number just under about $15,000. And we then took that to Payne and Dolan and said, hey, we have this number. We have retainage that we've held back, as well as some money for the scope that hasn't been finished. We would like to move forward with having this other firm do this. Do you have any objections to that? And fortunately, they said they really don't want to deal with it, and they told us to go ahead. They would sign a change order that explicitly took out this amount from their contract, and we would then contract with this other firm to do that work. And so tonight, we do have a change order from them to explicitly remove that amount, which is under the amount that we have been withholding. So it's not that we have to go back to them and get money back. We simply wouldn't pay that amount out. And then we have a proposal for signature from Lakeside to have them come in and do that. And they've indicated that they have availability to do so in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, good plan. Questions, comments? Hearing none, we have a motion by Amanda, a second by Tim. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Lauren. Item 9, new business, item for discussion and/or possible action, a rebranding initiative for the Oregon Senior Center.
Well, it seems like this would be an opportune time to think about whether or not we want to change anything about our name, our logo, our letterhead, all of those things. And as the memo pointed out, there's lots of reasons why it would be a good idea to consider whether we want to name a new building something more inclusive and perhaps something more neutral, especially if part of that building is going to be, or part of the time that building's going to be open to a broader segment of the community. And so we wanted to get feedback from all of you about what you were thinking about whether this was something you were interested in pursuing, and whether you have any ideas about how you would prefer that we go about that. There's a couple of options laid out, one being to let the staff have a crack at it, come up with some ideas, and see if there's anything there that grabs you, that you want to pursue. The other being to skip the staff and go straight to the professionals and see if they would be helpful to us You can always choose option 1 and later choose option 2.
I'm sorry. What was option 2 again?
Option 2 was to not pick the staff's brain at the beginning, but to go straight to the professionals,
To the consultants?
to a consultant, yeah.
Yeah, so, do we imagine that being a separate firm that we would, to do that? Yeah. Well, let's start with questions. Tim?
Well, when I read this yesterday, I just went, wow, I just want a lot more time to think about this. What a really interesting idea. You know, the kind of the two thoughts that grabbed me were, one, yes, I'm 66. I don't consider myself a senior, and I think that's not unique among people in my age cohort. And so something that helps sort of market the senior center to me and things I would want to do there, I think makes a lot of sense. But also too, I wonder if our seniors aren't a resource for the community in a way that they could be sharing some of their perspective with the rest of the village. And that's sort of a half-baked idea in my head that's rattling around right now. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in this community that sort of gets, I don't want to say ignored, but ignored, you know? And I wonder if there's a way the rebrand could help sort of draw more of that out. But I think this is a really compelling idea, and I think you're right, it is a great time to think about this.
Tom and Lynn?
I guess I was in some of the senior center discussions when we were gathering community feedback, and it was persistent that the senior name is a barrier to many people's usage. And I think the thing that struck me in this document as I read it was like, you know, when we talk about being an inclusive community, having a barrier that's caused by a name is a problem. And I guess I totally agree. I think it was time that we think about the rebranding of it. I guess that there's also the limitation I'm concerned about if you start to, I don't want to change the vision and the mission of the senior and senior group. It's still, that's what it's really about. But this is an expanded facility. This facility will have more access to it. I'm tending towards Tim's kind of position here, that there is substantial knowledge and people within our community who could give us input and give us feedback. Going that route doesn't preclude us from later engaging with a professional service if we think we can't get there. But I guess I would want to start there and gather and develop some community ideas first. And I guess that's sort of my general thoughts right now, but I could be convinced otherwise, so.
Lynn?
Yeah, I agree. Tim, you voiced what was going on in my head and I didn't even know it. That when I read this, I loved the idea, but there are so many question marks that come to my mind because one of the things I'm thinking about is, are we rebranding because of the building? Or are we rebranding because of just the new world that we live in and how we are trying to be inclusive? Because if it's building driven, we don't quite know exactly what all of the uses of that building will yet be. And when we have a better concept of that, I think that would drive a name more effectively, right? So if we're just doing a gym, or if we're doing that gym and we're opening it to the main hall for after hours, or things like that, right? So are we driving a rebranding because of the new building? Or are we driving a rebranding just because of, you know, wanting to be more inclusive? And I think having a discussion about that is helpful. Regardless, I do think that that senior name is something that, you know, we can consider. So is it connected? Is it divorced from that discussion? I guess I would like to know what your thoughts are on that.
My thoughts are, for the 15 years I've worked at the senior center, consistently people have said to me, you need a different name. In the 8 years that I've been the director of the senior center, people have said to me, you need a different name. And the theory always was, it would make sense to change the name if we moved into a new building. Because you don't want to change the name to something like, our current address is 219 Park Street. We could have changed our name to 219 on Park, and then we could have moved. And our address might not be 219 on Park anymore.
Right.
And then we'd have to be something else.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've heard from younger seniors, younger older adults, that's an oxymoron. I've heard from people of my age that they won't go to a senior center, that's where their parents went. And I think a lot of, you know, to Tim's point, there's been a lot of sociological studies that show that people are really pretty good at perceiving other people's ages, but really terrible at perceiving their own. So they can go to the senior center and go, wow, the people there seemed older, and yet they were the oldest person in the room. And so we've learned that we don't want the name to keep people away from all the things that are offered there. And if there are people who come now and are fine with the name, they're probably still going to come even if the name is different.
Right.
But the people who aren't coming because of the name might come for a different name. And several years ago, I toured the former Northfield Senior Center in Northfield, Minnesota.
Okay.
They changed their name, changed their logos, rebranded. Instead of calling themselves the Northfield Senior Center, they became 50 North. And they are a paid membership organization. The number of new members that they got under the age of 70 was tremendous. They were like, we had no idea the power of the name. Because people felt like now they belong to this like permanent summer camp or something. And so there is, I would say that there's a lot driving the change of a name, and that the sort of the opportunity is best paired with the change in building.
Okay.
Jeff, you'd have to come up. Thanks.
So there's the name, you know, and there's the, what are we selling? But, you know, there's logos, there's colors, there's other graphic design things. We're gonna have elements of the building that as we get into the fine finishes, that we're gonna want all of that stuff brought together. So this doesn't need to happen tomorrow, but it needs to happen in parallel with the building as it's evolving. So some of the things, maybe we don't know, but, and as the building design gets finalized, then we'll be able to feed that into the branding and the imaging. But we need to at least start the process and have it run with it, so when we do get to the end, it all kind of comes together. So it's more than just the name, it's all of that kind of graphic design element, color type of stuff, so.
Amanda, and then Paige.
Thank you for helping flesh that out. I like what I'm hearing. I am always in favor of public input, and I think it might be fun to do, like, open it up to the public and say, give us your ideas, right? And somebody out there might have a really creative idea, you know, if bonus points if you can add a logo or a design or element of some sort, or and just see what people come up with. It doesn't mean we're not guaranteed of taking one necessarily, but, like, you know, help us come up with ideas and make it a fun community project to get excitement about the new senior center, and you know, just see what comes of it, and then we can go from there. You know, we could give ideas to a firm to flesh out more. We could just pick something we like and have them design an official logo and keep the costs down. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but I like in public involvement.
Paige.
Yeah, I was just going to circle back. I think having staff's input is super important. They know and breathe this every day more than me and anyone else here, and so I think their input first is the best. But that's all. I was going to circle back to that first question.
it's always best if you can, hire an expert 50 miles from home, but we have one of probably an internationally known branding firm right here in town, and that is Ticey. I wonder before we go any further, if maybe we would go to them and ask them to give us a ballpark. And then I think we need that number anyway, I think probably to proceed. As Jeff said, assume we need to move in a timely manner, but I don't think another month is gonna make a lot of difference. So, what's your pleasure? That sounds like a good idea.
Sure.
Good with that.
Tom?
I would agree that, I was reading through the weaknesses of the alternatives and Amanda's comment of getting public input is greater with a private firm. That they're more likely to be able to access and
Right.
gather more survey and more public information than we will talking around amongst ourselves or posting on Facebook or talking
Right.
with staff. So I like the idea. It gives us a graduated, what are we really talking about here?
Sure.
And that has some appeal to me, so that leads me to be able to make a better decision.
All right, that can work.
Can you articulate back to us what you want?
Sure. We would approach them with the idea of, we're building a new senior center. We'd like to look at rebranding, not only from a graphics and logo, but really also consideration of a name more appropriate to the times and the use of the building. And
Is this just too Ticey?
well, that's my next question is that so I think we could probably go to Ticey to get a ballpark, but we wouldn't be required to get different other bids, would we? No, it's not construction, so.
So you're directing village staff for this?
Well, I'll do it, if that's all right with everybody.
That's a motion then?
Sure.
Well,
Please.
Maybe before we do the motion.
All right, go
just
ahead.
I just want to make sure that, like the people who designed our current Village of Oregon logo is a different company altogether. And I wouldn't necessarily want to invite a single company to just do it. I mean, it sounds to me like we want more request for proposal to see what other people might, I mean, unless you're just talking about a cost estimate.
I'm talking about a ballpark, not even an estimate.
Okay, a ballpark.
Sure, is not to exceed 5, not to exceed 25, I'm looking for a range.
Okay, just to clarify.
Because I know this is what they do. I guess at that point, we can decide if we want to put it out for a public bidding. Lynn, looks like you have a question.
I'm struggling with this because I totally understand the ballpark. It's just a general question. What does this cost to do, right? A rebranding. Regardless of whatever that number is, I don't know the scope of what we would be asking them to rebrand because we don't know what the scope of the building is yet. And so what happens if they ballpark us and then we finally get it all figured out and then I just feel like I'm confused about what path. I'm sorry, Jeff. Are you like
No.
shush and
Planned, but let me just try to
Go
throw
ahead.
a couple of ideas. We do have a pretty good idea of what's happening with the building. I mean, it's starting to gel, and very quickly we're going to be working on construction documents. So as far as like what's happening inside that building, we're going to have a pretty good idea. But so yes, we should get a budget and see how much we can afford to pursue. But other thoughts are, it's good to have a professional guide us, even if we are going to go out and get public input, even if we are going to go through a process with the staff and have the staff give input. But at least we have somebody, none of us in the room, including myself, know exactly how to go about this process. But the folks at Ticey know exactly how to do that. So I think if we get somebody on board, we can kind of DIY it for a while and they can help guide us, but eventually they have to pull it together and do graphic design and do some
Right.
of the other things that we need. So we can come up with a scope of work for them to help with their budget. And then another thought is it's gonna be very, very subjective of who we select for this type of work. So we can go out and get multiple proposals, but at some point, like we did for the library, if Ticey is the local, very obvious, very high-quality vendor for that type of professional help, and it's very subjective how we select that firm, we might end up going with Ticey.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could go do homework and come up with a scope of work. We could go to Ticey and help them understand what we think we need and get a budget, and maybe we come back at a meeting here fairly soon and say, look, this is the range of dollars. After talking to them, these are all the things we think we need throughout the course of the project, and then we could have a better discussion. That's okay with everybody.
I can see discomfort on Lynn's face. I understand what you're saying, Lynn, but I think, I think if we tell them of your concerns, they'll say, oh, yeah, we've dealt with this before.
Okay.
And, you know, whatever you may decide later about narrowing some parameters, it's not gonna have a big effect upon the budget.
Okay.
Does that help?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm not hijacking what you were trying to communicate, or with what I just said, how does that not jibe with what you're thinking?
I understand that we know what the building looks like, but we don't know what the use looks like. Is my 5-year-old coming to a basketball something after hours at that building? Is it a senior center multi-use gym? Because that's what we've decided. That is still very gray to me. And if we're gonna name a building, I wanna make sure that we know what it is that projects to the community, while also honoring the fact that this is still a senior center, older adult facility. And because I just don't know what that looks like yet, I'm having a hard time figuring out how we brand that, because we don't know
right.
if we're using it for after hours quite yet.
Right, but we're not close to the branding. We don't know what the logo looks like. We don't know
Right.
what the color is. That's gonna come.
Right.
But we've got to start somewhere, and
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how we can agree to how we're gonna start. So
Sure.
if we can go to Ticey, give them a scope of work, including maybe there's things like we want some graphic design elements that go with the branding and the logo and the color and the name and things inside the building and other, you know, here's a list. Can you give us some prices for all of these different things we think we might need? We can bring that information back. That's good information to have. You know, what does it cost for them just to be our guide for the first 6 months while we're working on this, gathering public input and staff input and everything else? And if it's happening parallel to the project, then as the project comes into vision, well then, you know, the rest of the stuff will come into focus with it, so. We're just trying to figure out how to get started.
Lisa, then Tim.
Just something I was going to mention, Lynn, that might help you feel better too. Is like I was mentioning about, you know, the community gym, and still trying to figure out, you know, how does that operate and who uses it and what hours and people pay, all those things, and just saying that, you know, the design of the space gives us the flexibility over time. Hopefully this building lasts us, you know, 80 to 100 years, and I think it's probably reasonable to expect that sometime in that century, you know, the feel, you know, use of that building will change. And I think that's something that whether we go to the community or, you know, eventually bring somebody on board, we want to communicate that. We want this to be a flexible, you know, whatever the name is, whatever the branding, that it doesn't just define it into one thing that 20 years now, like, we got to name it again, because that wasn't something, you know, it's something that's broad, but also, like you said, communicates so people know, like, what the heck is, you know, the gathering place or whatever it's called, you know, that it's clear. If you think about too, like Old Village Hall, it's lived many, many lives over the 80 years it was used. You know, it was a kindergarten, I believe. It was the police station. It was the library. It was Village Hall in bits and pieces and added on to. So just thinking about the lifespan of a municipal building, it has a lot of different, you know, generations and different uses over time too. So this is a starting point.
Thanks.
Tim?
Yeah, and I think the other thing to keep in mind here is as we're rebranding the senior center, we're staying focused on the older adults in our community. And if there's a degree to which the facility itself can help integrate those people with the rest of the community by having space that the rest of the community shares, then great. But it's still kind of about the seniors, or whatever term we're going to come up with for seniors, because we're not really seniors. But so I don't know that the multiple uses of the building would necessarily change the branding per se, because I think it still wants to be helping to shape the idea of we want to give to and take from this group of people in the community that we see as valuable.
Did you go through this with the library?
We didn't, sorry. We didn't redo our branding in terms of our library logo. We did, so we had that. We did do some branding for our capital campaign, but we did do what Jeff is talking about. We did have some graphic elements in the building. So we have some wallpaper that Ticey designed. They helped us with the donor recognition wall. They have a logo in our lobby. So there are some elements of the project they did, but it was a little more finite scope than you're talking about.
Okay. Great. You know, all we're really doing is getting a number, and maybe it's a number we don't want to pay, but ideally everyone's comfortable to get a number. So I'll make that motion and direct the chair to, with Jeff's assistance, I hope, it sounds like you've done this before, to make that inquiry and bring that back to the board. That's a motion. Second by Amanda. Further discussion? Okay, we have a motion by the chair, second by Amanda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Get that? Yeah. Thanks. Okay. 9B, retirement of Ann Stone, Assistant Director of Senior Center, review recruitment, selection, and hiring policy for replacement, and approval of minor revisions to job description. Staff recommendation, motion to approve. Tom and Paige. Who's speak to this?
Well,
Please.
we knew the day would come.
Right.
And I think I have here that she started in 2012, so she just next week will hit her 13th anniversary at the Senior Center. She's been an amazing asset to the community, a true Renaissance woman. She can go from teaching the Zumba class to playing the piano for the music performance to fixing my computer when it goes down. So we'll miss those things, but we have to move forward, and so we have outlined for you what that process looks like. Ann and I and a couple of the other staff looked at the job description for that position and did some minor tweaking to bring it up to date for what those job duties look like now, and wanted to make you aware of that retirement and that process that we are going to follow is laid out in the employee handbook, and wanted, if you have any questions, to be able to answer those for you.
Okay.
And to ask for the approval of the new job description, or the tweaked job description.
Okay. Tom?
We'd be remiss if we didn't recognize the contributions that Ann has made. It's difficult to even talk about from the standpoint of imagining of the Senior Center without Ann as part of it, but we need to move, and in recognition of everything that Ann does, we need to move to fill that position pretty quickly, and looking at the timeline and everything that has to be done to get someone in place in a timely way, we have to move on this, get it moving along.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion by Tim, second by Paige. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Rachel. 9C, Downtown Master Plan Implementation Priorities. Elise.
All right, so as you all know, we spent a majority of summer, fall, winter last year doing our update to our downtown master plan with help from our consultants at Redevelopment Resources and Studio GWA. Part of that plan identified a number of different sites, quite a number of which are village owned or we have a part in, and also lays out kind of implementation schedule as well as other programs to help promote active, vibrant, economically viable downtown usable space, all that stuff that we said we wanted. So this spring, after the plan was adopted, of course, the board has asked, how do we start implementing this? And the two kind of low-hanging fruit sites would be obviously what they call the town square, but Waterman Triangle Park. So a lot of geometry going on there. And that option, they presented three different kind of ranging from minimal changes to pretty significant changes, kind of flipping the park around and having some more developable land, more buildings on the village-owned site there. So those options obviously need to be explored and kind of a path chosen before we would pursue any kind of design. And that's primarily, again, potentially some commercial space, but also park space, some downtown public restrooms, the band shell, maybe a water feature, things like that. And then the second site would be the former village hall. So they did an architect on the staff of the consultant team who walked the building and did a lot of investigative work. The bones of the building are good. It's definitely reusable. And what we heard loud and clear from the public, the majority of folks wanted to see it reused, not really for a village purpose, but a private development that could put some money and an effort into the building to kind of bring it back up to its former glory and give it a new life, and bring some more activity again to the downtown area. So some of the concepts that they proposed were a mix of apartments and like a artist workshop gallery space, or just full residential use. I know we've also been approached for other users, want to potentially see it for office type use, kind of a local headquarters for, small business, something like that. So wanted to bring this before the board again and kind of ask you all how you'd like to proceed, I guess, with one or both of those areas. Village Hall, kind of is as its own distinct building, that being probably a private development, it's sort of a different process than the park, the future of the park. What the consultants recommended and what we would recommend is writing and issuing an RFP, request for proposals, for people to submit their ideas, submit their offer for the building. What would they pay? Would they be asking any public assistance? What use would they have? What's their timeline? We would also be able to kind of communicate any limitations on the building. We don't want to see X, Y, Z. We want to make sure that, this use is, going to be a good neighbor to the park use next door, kind of making sure that they understand too, maybe that park space might change over time. And so parking and access and activities going on over there, might look different than they do now, and making sure that that's something they're aware of and on board with and would be a partner to. So we did a similar process for this for the old Methodist Church, former new library site, 249 North Main Street, where ultimately North Point was chosen for their workforce townhome project, and then part of the site was retained for a park. So at that point, we, I think, received 5 proposals for that property, had everybody come, to a board meeting, do a presentation. Proposals were in your packet. We had people able to do site tours and things like that, had time to ask questions. So looking for some direction from the board on how you'd like to proceed with implementation of the downtown plan and bringing a couple of those sites and project ideas forward.
Lynn?
feel like someone else should go before me. I'm a problem child today. I love this. I think I would support a motion to move forward in the steps to publish a draft RFP for Old Village Hall. I'm wondering if in that request, can we ask for specific proposals incorporating a public restroom component? Are we allowed to be that specific when we draft an RFP?
Sure.
Yeah, it's our,
Because that would maybe help determine the Waterman Triangle Park, depending on what that looks like, what that design would look like. I think that would help in that next step, for me personally.
yeah. Is that something you would want to see as like a requirement of their, or is that something that you could incorporate into your project? And if so,
I'd like the board to
explain.
weigh in on that.
Yeah.
I guess I would hesitate to make it a requirement because it sort of turns it into a if you can't turn it into an apartment building with a restroom within the apartment, it's sort of counter. If you talked about a retail facility, then yes, public restrooms makes more sense to me, but having public restrooms as part of an apartment building just sort of seems conflicting to me. I guess I think it does, the Village Hall is our primary project. I think it's something we can move on and drafting an RFP, and I don't know about the restrooms. I'm kind of, I recognize the need. I've been to the concerts. I know why they need a restroom.
Yeah.
Yet I don't know that that's the solution.
I just thought, a procedure question. It sounded like you were making a motion, Lynn. Okay, so we need to clean up that restroom part before we get a second.
I don't know why this has become
Sorry,
a
I
thing
was
I
poorly
spend a
phrased.
lot of time talking about.
Yeah, so, before we get a second, we need to clean up that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to clarify, if it's possible, what
Please.
I was envisioning versus what you just mentioned, Tom. This would not be like public restrooms within a retail facility or apartments. This would be a portion of that building to be completely designated as a public restroom.
With like exterior access.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exterior access, no interior access.
Yeah,
Do you understand what I'm saying?
that's the way to do it anyway. Yeah.
There we go.
But the question remains is whether you're making that a condition or a alternate to the
Sure.
RFP.
My proposal would to be make that a condition, a requirement of the RFP. But I'm only one of a group, so.
Okay, well, then is there a second?
Not yet.
We need more discussion.
I have other
More
thoughts.
discussion, yeah.
Okay, Amanda, you have and then it sounds like Tim maybe. Huh?
Okay, so I know that one of the ideas that was talked about before was using that space potentially to expand the fire department at some point. And maybe that's not an option anymore, maybe that we've dismissed that. I just feel like it's the elephant in the room, because once we like sell this building to somebody else and the land, it's gone, and we're not getting it back to expand a fire station. So I just want to make sure that if we're deciding to move forward, then that's a decision that we're making. We're going to own it, and the fire EMS they'll have to figure something else out.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
It sounds like Tim would be
Okay.
appropriate.
So yes, the fire station is an important part of the downtown discussion, in my opinion. We've learned a lot in the last few months with the consultant we hired. We're getting close to having some clarity for what the fire department will be looking for. The plan is at the July joint boards meeting, we're gonna make a presentation, and the idea is primarily around accountability for the money we spent this year on hiring a consultant. What did we get for that? And what do we now know that we didn't know going into this? And then kind of get feedback from all of those constituencies. What do you like? What do you hate? Where are the red lines? But there are a couple of things we know for sure. One, that from a standpoint of serving the community, the fire district itself, we right now can reach 63% of the fire, places we have to go to, not the geography, but the hot spots, if you will. We get to 63% of those within 4 minutes from a downtown location. No other location we tried got us even close to that. The next closest was like 42%, I think. A secondary fire station, the best we could do would get us then with 2 fire stations to 70%, which we felt was like a lot of investment for very little benefit to go from 63 to 70. So really what we're going to come back to is a downtown fire station is what makes the most sense in terms of protecting life and property within the village and the townships we serve. That being said, what we think we need will not fit on the current footprint where the fire station sits. And, you know, I know that in the past there have been people who've tried to push for the idea of expanding the fire station into where the old village hall is. I don't think that's a workable solution because that probably does significant damage to at least the parking and possibly also the businesses that also exist downtown. So realistically, I think where we're probably going is another location somewhere near downtown would be the best solution for the fire department. If in fact we did that, that would then create a scenario whereby that old fire station property could potentially be developed, and that in conjunction with the old village hall might be a more attractive project for a developer to look at. My expectation is somewhere around the end of this calendar year, we'll have some more clarity around what the fire district is proposing and what the towns feel like they're willing to support and what the village is willing to support. And so I guess I would suggest we hold off on moving forward with the old village hall until about the end of the year and see where that takes us. The other thing I'll say is that one of the things that we've pretty aggressively committed to, if we're building a new downtown fire station, is having a space there that would be open to the public 24/7 with public restrooms. And that would be part of the plan. That's what a lot of fire stations do around the state, apparently. So those are my thoughts.
Mic drop.
I think, Tim, it's very timely information. A couple thoughts occur to me. And one is, I don't think this board has ever officially voted what to do with the village hall. And maybe we should be doing that first. I would also add to Tim's comments a perspective, and that is, while perhaps by the end of the year we may have a plan in place, the chances, in my opinion, the chances of building a fire station before 2029 or 2030 are remote. Others may disagree. That means that the information that Tim has presented us, and that is there may be additional property available downtown if we decide to relocate the fire station. The timeline is much different than sending out an RFP on to do something with the village hall right now. But are we in agreement, or do we have a majority that agrees that the disposition of the village hall, as Tim has pointed out, it's, at least in Tim's opinion, and I suspect the commission, it's not going to add to the practicality of that site for them to expand the fire station onto that land. Yeah, and so it's, one doesn't hinge upon the other, if that's the consensus we've come to. And that being the case, we could wait until perhaps the end of the year when the fire commission at least can recommend to the district partners what their recommendation is as far as the station, and accordingly we'd wait until then to decide what to do with the village hall. Or we could proceed tonight under the assumption that it's a separate decision. Amanda.
Okay, I personally think we can move on.
Mhm.
I do feel like maybe this is a good opportunity. But I had a question for Lynn about the restrooms, because I'm thinking, you know, if that is the way we go, and I'm interested in your opinions, of course. There's a public restroom at Kaiser Park. There could be, potentially, maybe, public restrooms available at the current fire station. They have restrooms, right?
Yeah,
They're
but
not,
it's not public friendly.
I mean, maybe we could work with them, and
Well, if
that
they
might
ra-
be something we could do, but is that too far? That's my question, because I think what you have envisioned is right next to Triangle Park, because that's where we have concerts and and,
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
So, I mean, it's not like there are no downtown restrooms, but how far are people willing to walk?
Well,
With kids that need to go.
Well, yes, and it's more like, am I willing to go to the concert if I'm gonna have to walk a block to the restrooms?
Right.
Probably not, at least me, anyway. Go ahead.
And I think that that's honestly what I heard most coming out of the downtown master planning was the lack of restrooms. Like that was a huge narrative that just kept coming up in a lot of the public sessions. And I think even if we had it in the fire station, having designated downtown public restroom, regardless of whether it's for a concert, regardless of what, if you're walking your dog on a Saturday afternoon or you're, you know, shopping or something like that, I think it's, I think the community is asking for a designated space. And so not within another entity is what I think is the ideal.
Let's get at least a sense, if not about, of the disposition of the village hall. And let's not involve restrooms in that discussion. Go ahead, Tom.
I would be in favor of making the village hall and its eventual disposition a primary project of advancing our downtown development plan.
Okay.
Sounds like a motion?
Yeah.
I'm seconding that.
Yes.
Then the second, further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain on that.
You're abstaining?
I'm not certain.
Okay. Okay, so now we can discuss the restrooms, I guess.
Phil?
Oh, sorry, Elise.
So a couple thoughts too. What you just said was ideally would not be part of another institution. Just to point out, you know, if there was another user in Village Hall, it, you know, not saying it's not a good idea, but it adds an element of, again, it limits the building, right, of its potential use, potential square footage, things like that. If there are public restrooms that are required to be carved out, I guess also just kind of working out, is that a village project within, you know, is it a village like facility that we maintain within a private space? Is it condoed out? Those are just things to kind of consider. All of the, if you look back at like the Waterman Triangle Park projects, those all had a restroom building as part of that. And, you know, we don't know what type of response we'll get from an RFP. We have no idea what kind of timeline, you know, that might look like as far as when those, you know, if there's restrooms or whatever, when those doors would open, when they would be available. The park project, you know, just like we've done with other parks, you know, could potentially be done in phases. I know part of like one concept, I think it was maybe even just kind of the smallest concept one for the park, had a small restroom building with like a little water feature and water fountain, you know, like a bubbler on the back of it. And so not a huge building. I mean, the cost adds up for restrooms for sure. But it didn't really impact like the footprint of the park in a huge way. So, you know, that could be done as maybe phase one of a larger park improvement project or something if we really wanted to see restrooms happen sooner, but maybe not limit the potential use, or maybe like scare away users, I suppose, or complicate that transaction. I think there's probably, there's certainly a way to do it, but just to say that's not the only option for restrooms downtown. There's restrooms as part of the park that they considered as part of the concepts for that area.
That makes a lot of sense to me, that the restrooms would be part of the park, not the old village hall.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way too.
Yes.
I just disagree. I respectfully disagree that I felt like all three plans put the restroom right next to the band shell. And I just don't see that being a comfortable situation where you're sitting watching the live music and also watching people go to the bathroom and play in a water, just my opinion. I don't think it
That's
fit
more
in any
positioning,
of those.
right?
But in any of those three pieces, if we're putting it in the park, there's just less square footage in that park. And so it's, regardless of where you put it, it's gonna be sort of in the way of the entertainment.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, and just to add to, those were conceptual level designs, so as
Sure.
we see too, I mean, that's just saying, these are kind of the features, this is a potential layout, so if and when we chose to move forward with the park design, we could say, we don't wanna see a restroom next to the band shell, let's explore other options for where that could be, maybe that's closer to the intersection, or, a lot of those concepts had rearrangement of the parking and the green space, so maybe it's kind of behind where people sit and closer to the downtown businesses, maybe more visible from the intersection where people are kind of walking and crossing and stuff. So just because it's shown a certain way on that plan doesn't mean that, we don't like that, that's not where it's gonna,
Yeah,
that's how we
no.
have to build it. If we don't like the concept plan, we can change it.
Amanda?
So, just conceptually speaking too, the band shell could be moved.
Yep.
Yeah, the third option had basically it's a very sacred ground, right? But moving it, kind of rotating it so it's closer to the intersection, the downtown intersection stoplight.
Yeah, so things are not permanently placed. I think we have flexibility for location, and we can talk about that. I'm happy, I agree. I wouldn't want it right next to the band shell, but I think there's options that we could, and I'd want to see them first, maybe. Maybe that's something we need to decide before we move on with the actual building.
Well,
Tom.
I guess, sorry. Just from the standpoint of, I think a restroom becomes a part of the discussion of the park as opposed to the village hall. I see the park development as separate as an activity from our plans for starting a first project. Our second project might be the park, the second priority. And then it's realigning things where, I don't think you want to put a restroom right next to the band shell. It just doesn't really work very well. But, then what are the options in the park? And so that's a different project.
Go ahead, Amanda.
So I know we're on the restroom thing, but I feel like I want to move forward to the village hall thing a little bit, because I feel like we can talk more about what that would look like for the park. Like making the restrooms as part of the park. Do we need a motion for that? I guess I'd
For
ask
what?
that. Like deciding to separate the
No.
restroom
no.
from, the public restroom
There's-
requirement from the village hall?
There's no motion on the table, so you can start from scratch. Because
I feel like that's
Lynn
kinda
made a
what we're-
motion, but there was no second.
But I'd like to bring you along. Do you have any concerns about that? I don't
This is
know.
like what I'm gonna be known for. Here's the only thing exactly. Here's the only thing I'm gonna say. And I'm gonna just say this. I think there's a reason why the porta potties are where they are currently.
Which is where, honestly? I
Which
don't know
is
where we're talking
where
about.
we would, at the far end of that village hall.
I guess I've blocked them out of my memory.
It's fair. It's the side entrance. So in my mind, I was envisioning carving out that end space. And I fully understand that, like, everything is very in flux. We can design Triangle Park the way we want to. Here's my problem. What if we go that route and then we wished we would have put the restrooms there because we don't like any of the park designs with a restroom right in the middle of a triangle that's surrounded. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to say no to an option that we have. And then later on down the road, we're like, darn, there's not a great place for us to put this fairly awkward building. Do you know what I mean?
Well, but within the old village hall, where are the restrooms? How close are they to that door?
They're in the center of the building, so
So you'd have to do
Bit of
major
ways, yeah.
work to put a bathroom by that
Yes, you
door,
would. You'd
to
have
be
to-
right inside the door.
Yeah, you'd have to.
but if it's
plumb
gonna
that.
become apartments or something like that, there'll be
have too
all
much
kinds of
work in it.
plumbing work, you know, to serve those units too.
We could, go ahead, Lisa.
I haven't, well, just maybe a suggestion as a compromise to move this forward is if you all wanted to move forward with issuing RFP, maybe we could list that as, like, these are some things that we would require, ask of the bill, you know, we don't wanna see, again, ABC, we
Yeah.
do wanna see XYZ, something to consider if this would work with your project. An idea we have for the space is to have, you know, exterior access to, and maybe it's just like one or two, you know, unisex family restroom type
Right.
thing. It doesn't have to be like a full-blown men's and women's room. Is that something you could incorporate into your plan? If so, elaborate.
Right. A recommendation rather than a requirement.
Yeah.
And we could also, we could actually, because we control the setbacks, et cetera, we could tell them that they could put that in the, basically that green space that's between the curb and the building right now. So really wouldn't be giving up potentially
Right,
any.
it could be in addition to
Yeah.
the building, and maybe there's, you know, we would agree to maintain these, you know, Public Works would maintain, clean these, whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe that would work for some users, maybe not, but it would be, maybe something we could ask.
Well, yeah, I like the idea of it being an ask and not, you know, a requirement, thank you. You all right with that? You wanna try your motion again?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Since you're gonna be known for this.
Yeah,
you might
this
as
is
well
my
do it.
legacy right
Like
here.
Your campaign button for next.
If we ever get these built, I'm gonna have to go to these public restrooms a lot, apparently. It's gonna be
That's where the
my
village hall
new
table will be,
space.
right?
Yes.
The board table.
Meet me at the public restrooms.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right, okay, let's.
Okay, here's my motion. My motion is to proceed to publish a draft request for proposals to engage private developers for the old village hall with a recommendation for some public restrooms.
And you want it on the building's exterior design on the south side.
We'll just leave that open-ended.
Just leave it.
Thank you.
We will bring the draft RFP back to the village board
Okay.
for all of you to look at, to see if it's acceptable before we publish it.
Thanks.
We have a motion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Second, Amanda? Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 9D. Oh, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry, there's another part to this. Oh, there's another part to this. Right, yes, right, I'm sorry. Town Square site, which Elise talked about. So there's different options here. I will read this quickly. The plan outlines 3 distinct options for enhancing the downtown core, which includes Waterman Triangle Park, parking and main intersection. The options involve increasing levels of intervention from landscape and pavement changes to the addition of new mixed-use buildings. The next step identified is to determine preferred option. If there is a desire to proceed in this manner, the board's primary task area would be to discuss the merits of each of 3 options to provide clear directions on a preferred concept for further planning. I would just observe that we would certainly all need these further options to be refreshed in our mind before we could really have this discussion. So really, you're looking for direction for us to say, yes, we'd like to go ahead and have this discussion. Is that accurate?
Yes, another point I just wanted to let you know, in the draft Parks CIP, when we get to that point, I believe we have this in 2030. Is Is that right, Lauren? Or maybe a little further out for, this is, obviously it's a placeholder, but for the Waterman Triangle Park. So we could also have that as part of the discussion. It can refresh your memory on what the options were, and then we could also kind of talk about how that could fit into the CIP,
Okay.
timing-wise.
So basically, you're looking for, if the board would like you to proceed at this time. Is that
Yep.
accurate?
With an RFP?
No,
No,
no, no.
just exploring
The discussion, to
discussion.
put it on the agenda to start discussing it.
About what we'd like to see in that space.
We
Okay,
review the
great.
options and choose one, or maybe,
Okay.
a part thereof. That make sense? Need an option to that effect? I mean, a motion to that effect? Amanda?
Okay, feel free to wordsmith this, but I'll make a motion to, or that we put on a future agenda a discussion about what we would like in an RFP or what we'd like to see in the space
No, I think
for
you,
that.
I think,
Just the
space.
overall discussion.
it's just discussion, yeah.
Yeah.
The future of Waterman Triangle.
Good enough,
Park,
whatever.
Future water, right. I'll second that.
That was a mess, sorry.
Discussion. Everybody understand what we're doing?
Yes.
Yeah. We're basically adding an agenda item. So all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Elise. Did we cover everything in your
Yeah.
memo?
Yep, we're good.
Thank you. Okay. Do we need a break? We're not that far from the end, but we can take a break. If anybody, I don't see any hands going up, so we'll keep going. Let's see, 9D, addressing village trustee vacancy. We have a very clear memo from Martin. It's not a surprise. Our options are to fill by appointment, to order a special election, very expensive, leave the office vacant. That we do not have any precedent of doing that in my memory, and that's pretty long. So one of the decisions we would need to make is one of those three: fill the vacancy by appointment, order a special election, leave the office vacant. I will make a motion that we fill the vacancy by appointment. Second by everybody. I will put Tom down. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next is, sorry. Oh. Next was the appointment process. We, three of our current trustees are very familiar with this, as they went through this exact process as described. And that is, we advertise the opening. We use a questionnaire, a copy of which was in your packet. They will come in and each applicant will do a presentation, and then we will proceed to vote. So basically, the options of it, the issues at hand are, we'll do everything the same, or we can change any of the four I presented, or the questions that we used in the past. I will make a motion to do everything the same.
I'll second it.
Second by Tim. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm proud of that. Okay, let's see. Number 10, reports of village officers, department heads, and consultants. Information only, no action by the village board will be taken. See reports in the meeting packet. A, village administrator report. Questions or comments for Martin? B, Public Works Director Report, 2024 Consumer Confidence Report on the Oregon Water Utility. Lauren.
I will make this very brief. We do issue this report every year. the one thing I would want to call out is huge credit to our utility clerk, Sue Poole, who wrangles all of us to do this every year. And our water utility manager, Don Gray, would want me to summarize this as the water is safe. So that's pretty much where we are at.
Okay, questions for Lauren? Tim?
Yeah, it's awesome how great our water is. But I notice toward the end of the report, it mentions that we sometimes get a little salt in our water, primarily from road salt. And I know that in the past, we had talked about a program to reduce our use of road salt in the winter. Can you update us on where we're at on that thought?
Yes, absolutely. So we're taking a number of steps. Number one is that we are moving forward with outfitting our winter programming over at Public Works with brine capabilities. So we're looking at getting a brine that you'll see that in this, a brine tank, which you will see in the CIP for next year. Additionally, money is in there to outfit our trucks with brine equipment. And that's a big step that a lot of communities have taken that has allowed them to cut back on their road salt use. We are also looking this year at sending our operators to the Wisconsin Saltwise training. That's a great program that MMSD and the full Wisconsin Saltwise group put on that really just kind of educates operators on best practices, educates decision makers on how to make plans for doing kind of road salt application, and if you want to cut back, how you can do that. So that's something we're looking at in the near future to try to cut back on that.
Awesome, thank you.
Anybody else? Lynn?
I just want to make a really quick comment about that because we met with the Saltwise, the Sustainability Committee, and interestingly, the majority of the salt that communities see comes from private plowing and salting organizations. Municipalities have, for a long time, been quite responsible on that. So still need to educate those private partners, I suppose.
And Saltwise, they probably told you, they do a training specifically for private applicators. So not something that communities necessarily mandate, but certainly we could do a good job of kind of getting the word out and letting folks know that this is available, because ultimately the less salt put down, the less money you have to pay for that salt. So there are benefits.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. 10D, Senior Center Director, Adult Day Programs, Successful Relicensing. Oh, I missed one? I'm sorry, I did. Thank you. Item 10C, Police Department Report. Notice of revisions to Criminal Justice Information Systems Policy.
Yeah, I'll just speak real briefly. So we are in a dead sprint to try to prepare for accreditation. Our on-site's in October. The revisions have not been updated on our website because we're just trying to get through so many updates so quickly. The SIGES policy is a very lengthy policy. The additions I made to that policy with the entry, cancellation, and validation are things we've been doing for at least the last 10, if not 15 years. We just now have it detailed in our policy in accordance with Wiley Egg standards for 6th edition. It's just an upgrade. So happy to take any questions, but this really has to do with entering, like an example would be a stolen vehicle into CIB. Not only does our policy now cover in length entry, but then cancellation, and then every year CIB will send us emails requiring that we validate and confirm, is this vehicle still stolen? Try to eliminate those entries that still may be in the system, but the property was recovered. So happy to take any questions, but nothing too exciting.
Anyone? No, thank you, Chief. Okay, now 10D, Senior Center Director, Adult Day Program Successful Relicensing.
Like all healthcare facilities, we're subject to spot unannounced inspections by the State Department of Health Services. The Adult Day Program has had a license for many decades now, and the state inspectors show up unannounced, and with about a 6-page long, single-space checklist of all the things they want to see, and it gets pretty picky. Like, did you date the spice container in your cupboard when you opened it? Kinds of stuff. So you never know when they're coming. It could be 2 years apart. It could be 6 years apart. They just walk in and you drop everything and do what needs to be done. But I would like to especially thank the Adult Day Program staff and the volunteers who are very devoted to that program for continually maintaining the standards necessary to allow the program to, again, get through with no deficiencies, no citations. So just proud of them and wanted to make sure that you and the community were aware of that.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Do a kudos to
Yeah,
them.
right,
Thank
yeah.
you for running such a great program.
You bet.
That's great.
Item 11, announcements and miscellaneous business. A, announcements, comments, communications, upcoming meetings and events, and miscellaneous meetings. Village boards members may provide brief statements, but no discussion or action on the body shall occur. Well, let's start with department heads or staff. No? Okay, board members? Tom?
I would be remiss if we didn't mention that there was a ice cream social on Friday. Thursday, yes. I'll be there one of those 2 times. Thursday.
Thursday.
At the senior center.
Amanda?
They're still opening on the transportation committee. I'm going to start saying this at every single meeting because you never know who you're going to hit. So you can apply online or at Village Hall, please. You no specific qualifications other than living in the village and having an interest in bringing public transportation to Oregon.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Let's see, 11B, future agenda items. Anyone? None. Okay. Before we start item 12, Attorney Konopacki has some comments for us.
We can do that as part of 12, but one of the things that we've been doing recently with the various communities where we work is when we do a closed session that is under the exception to open meetings law related to the bargaining exception, we call it. We've been recommending that there be more open session discussion of the item that you may want to go into closed session on, and it's really a case-by-case issue. There's been some relatively recent case law that really kind of crystallized the requirements of a public body as it relates to when you go into closed session, and I think it's probably best to evaluate those requirements with each topic as they come up for a closed session, but the general rule is if there's any information that isn't part of what's required to be kept outside of the public sphere, that's part of the discussion that should be discussed in open before you go into closed. The idea being that you as board members or city council members or whichever body you're on should be, the public should be aware of what you're thinking as to why it's necessary to go into closed session. So for, it's relatively simple for tonight, because there's the whole point of it is to establish a negotiation strategy for these 2 potential purchases. So I would kick it off by saying you've received information in your closed session materials, and obviously you're all very aware, it's been discussed already tonight, that the vacation of Waterman Street is part of the overall new yet to be unnamed center project. And that there's the need for the village's representatives to approach those property owners and have some direction from the board as to what the parameters of that negotiation will be. I think that's sufficient for purposes of what I was just saying for you to make a motion, someone to make a motion to go into closed session. In other circumstances, we'll probably do quite a bit more. I'll just give you one other example. If we have a development agreement and there's negotiations and we need board feedback, if there's been back and forth between the developer and staff, if the developer's aware, for instance, has submitted a proposal or has received from us a counter, we'll talk about those in open session. We'll kind of establish where do we sit now, what has been communicated, what hasn't, and let you decide if you want to go into closed session to give us parameters. In a situation like this, it's pretty simple, so.
Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, just a question. Is it recommended that we read this into the record so that people have a good understanding of why we are deciding to go into closed session?
Well, that's pretty well covered by the agenda language. It's a robust description, but it is required by law that the presiding officer read the exception to the rule, and then we have to take a roll call vote every time to go in, so.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, so, let's see,
Just read all three, Phil.
sorry?
Read all three paragraphs.
Okay, thanks. It's kind of awkward, but anyway, closed session, property acquisition strategy related to the Oregon Area Senior Center project. The village board will consider a motion to convene a closed session to deliberate on its strategy for the potential acquisition of property interests resulting from the planned vacation of Waterman Street, public right-of-way between Brook Street and Park Street. The purpose of the closed session is to allow the board to review and discuss components of negotiation, including third-party appraisals, potential compensation scenarios, and specific negotiating parameters. The parameters established in this session will serve as guidance for staff and consultants in subsequent negotiations. Any final binding purchase agreement must be brought back to the village board for approval in a future open session. This closed session is authorized under Wisconsin Statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub e, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investment of public funds, or conducting other specified public business, wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. So I'd entertain a motion to do so. Tim and Tom. This is a roll call vote.
Peterson,
Yes.
Higgins,
Yes.
Van Campen,
Yes.
McDaniel,
Yes.
Kirchdorfer,
Yes.
Knipfer.
Yes.
And I would add the village board will adjourn the meeting in its closed session, which we are now in.